Britain may leave the EU in 2017 if once an in-out referendum on Britain's membership is to vote out. Where would Britain be without the EU? Would it be beneficial? Would Britain become an isolated state? Are we going to Brussels to find out what the EU does and whether or not it would be beneficial for us to leave? But first, I ask what people think about the EU.
I can understand why we are in Europe. The trading aspects of it is fantastic for the country, and being as a united nation, as a group, there's a lot more power being in Europe. But on the other aspect, I find that it's suffocating this country.
I'm not for or against it. I'm going to have to obviously do a lot more reading up on all the stuff.
So my thoughts on EU are: I'm proud to be part of the EU. I don't agree on some of the EU's influences on the general public. I think there should be a little bit more restriction on people from other parts of the EU coming over to Britain, and vice versa as well. I think it should be fair.
I spoke to Rowena Davis, Labour councillor for Peckham and political commentator, on the phone about how she feels the media has portrayed Europe.
Most of the coverage in the tabloids that are read most widely has been very negative, and it overly focuses on the immigration point, and it doesn't really point out how many Brits go abroad to Europe and use that movement, and it doesn't look at the other advantages of the EU, and I think that has a detrimental effect on how people feel about Europe.
Immigration is British society's biggest problem, according to a think tank poll, with 2014 seeing a net UK migration of 212,000 and a rise of 60,000 EU citizens in comparison to 2013. For many, immigration to the UK is a growing problem. But despite the rise, 1.8 million Brits live in Europe, and international students add 8 billion to the UK economy.
We've just arrived in Brussels, home to one of the European parliaments, and over the next couple of days I'll be finding out whether it would be beneficial for the UK to stay in the European Union.
Brussels, capital city of Belgium and home to the European Parliament and European Court of Justice. The city is one of the most cosmopolitan cities in the world, with 27% of its 150,000 population made up by immigrants and 40,000 employed by the EU. The city is known more for its politics than Belgium's famous chocolate.
Morning, we're going to be going to the European Parliament later to film a few MEPs on their thought about Britain and the European Union.
Marta Andreasen, Conservative MEP for the South East, said in response to where the UK will be if we stay in the EU, there are presently a majority of MEPs who are wedded to a deeper, more integrated federal EU. It stands at around 5% of our total budget, which is a huge multi-billion amount. She added that if we left, we would immediately save billions that we're giving as a price of membership. Our banks and financial sector would be free and unfettered by costly and needless EU laws. Marta Andreasen takes a conservative, Eurosceptic view that the EU is a financial burden for the UK. The former UKIP MEP switched the Conservatives because of the guarantee of a referendum on Europe.
I'm standing outside the European Parliament today, where we'll be interviewing shortly Roger Helmer, MEP for UKIP. Now, obviously there's going to be certain stigmas behind it because it's the United Kingdom Independent Party, so they're going to be very anti-Europe, very against immigration. So this is what this is what I'm assuming at the moment. But what I want to do is I really want to tackle these issues and kind of talk to him about what he thinks to do with this, why he thinks we should leave the European Union, and what benefits he feels it will bring to the United Kingdom as a result.
I spoke to East Midlands UKIP MEP Roger Helmer about how the EU is affecting Britain.
The EU is making us poorer and less democratic and less free. We believe that Britain will be economically better off, substantially better off when we leave. And the real classic was when Angela Merkel a few weeks ago came to London and spoke to the Houses of Parliament, and she said, if you're thinking you're going to get a major treaty change, forget it. Nobody in Brussels actually believes that there will be any significant concessions. There are dozens of countries, including, for example, Korea, who have free trade agreements with the European Union. When we leave, we will have a free trade agreement with the European Union. So market access will be broadly similar.
Roger Helmer suggested Britain will continue to have a relationship with the European Union even after we left. I asked him then, why does he feel we should leave?
Over-regulation, immigration, the euro, energy policy, these are all European policies that are damaging our economy. Now, the worst impact of European policy, and I'll be quite honest about this, is in Southern Europe. And if you look at Greece, the youth unemployment rate is currently 60%. In Spain, Italy, Portugal, it's pretty bad. Now, thank heaven we never joined the euro currency, but it is having a dreadful effect on the eurozone, causing that unemployment in Greece and so on. And the second thing, of course, is uncontrolled immigration. So we get long queues of people coming in from Eastern Europe, and we are not opposed to immigration entirely, but we think that the numbers and the skills ought to be properly controlled.
From the interview with Roger Helmer, what I found was that actually Britain will be carrying on a relationship with the EU, but it won't be what it is currently. We will still have a free trade agreement with them. However, what we will not have is, we will not have the same policy in regards to immigration, in regards to the law, and in regards to just the general overall business and economy. I think that will all change as a result. And that's what I'm kind of learning from Roger Helmer. It's kind of interesting because when I went into the interview, I had this very strong assumption of, well, Godfrey Bloom, basically, that kind of whole kind of stereotype, immigration, all those kind of issues. And actually what I found was a real actual plan of what they're potentially wanting to do, and it's not exactly what I was expecting. So, do I agree with their policies entirely? I still don't. But I can kind of respect the position they're coming from, and they're coming from a completely different angle.
I spoke to Bill Newton-Dunn, Liberal Democrat MEP for the East Midlands, and asked him, what do you think the effect of leaving the EU would be?
Britain would quit, and they'd say there are much better jobs in America, or Berlin, or Paris, or Rome. Why should we stay in an island which has cut itself off, from which the multinationals are fast moving out somewhere else? What's the point of staying in Britain?
I asked Bill Newton-Dunn why the Liberal Democrats feel staying in the EU is important.
Well, the positives are peace, economic strength, and togetherness, and a strong voice vis-à-vis the rest of the world for negotiating trade, but internet, for everything, and so on. Well, for two reasons. One is jobs. There would be a hemorrhage in jobs in Britain if we moved out. But the other thing is even more key. It's about having influence, about a say in the rules about trade, and in other words, a voice.
So, after finishing an interview with Bill Newton-Dunn, what I found is that Liberal Democrats kind of see the European Union as a family, as 28 separate states joined together, and that everyone's making compromises, everyone's doing stuff to kind of make the best out of it, but they know there's problems in there, they know there's things that need to be changed. But what they're doing is they're compromising, they're making sacrifices in certain areas in order for the greater, bigger picture of being a united Europe in the sense that actually they're able to be strong competitors in a global, ever-changing, ever-interconnected market.
I spoke to Andrew Duff, Liberal Democrat MEP for the East of England, about why he feels being in the EU is important for Britain's economy.
Of the single market is Britain's market. It's our principal trading partners are all in the EU. If we turn our back on that, it will be an act of economic suicide.
I asked Andrew Duff why he feels staying in the EU is important.
The prospect of pulling out would be devastating for employment, for travel, for freedom of movement, for education. We think that European integration is the natural and sensible response to the challenges of globalization. If we wish to make a difference in the world, we've got to do it through close partnership with all our neighbours.
Just finished filming the MEPs, and what can I say really? It's been a really mixed bag. I mean, on one side you've got Roger Helmer, a UKIP MEP, who actually made some quite valid points about the EU. He was stating, well, you can still trade outside. They're obviously building relations with Turkey and with Korea and China, so it really shows that actually there is possibility to still trade even outside the EU. But then other people, like Bill Newton-Dunn, makes a really interesting point. Actually, Britain is not an empire anymore. We've got to think of ourselves, actually, what are we going to do in the future? How are we going to make ourselves still a force to be reckoned with? And Well, as I said, we're the ageing relative in Europe. Should we stay with our family or should we go? I mean, it's still such an open debate, and one which isn't as obvious as purely in or out. It's really what would be most beneficial with regards to each policy. How are we going to leave the EU and end up isolated on our own? Or is there a possibility of being within the EU and actually still make an impact and make our voices heard and being able to accomplish something? And I think that's something that isn't a simple answer of 2017, let's go out or let's stay in. It's 2017, let's see what happens, but not make a firm, solid decision.
The UK will vote on an in-out referendum in 2017 if the Conservative government is re-elected. Prime Minister David Cameron is currently in talks to gain Britain a better deal in Europe. But what going to Brussels has shown is that Britain's position in Europe is not as simple as in or out. With Angela Merkel talking of a United States of Europe, Britain's future role in Europe and the world is still uncertain.